Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for all coming. So, inshallah, we're going to start the program. We have tonight some of our dear friends with the Islamic Society, Jim McConkey and Norm, who are with the Refugee Justice League. So tonight they're going to talk to us about Know Your Rights program, where they're going to go over with us about our rights that we have. And without any further ado, I will turn the time to them. And then once we finish the program, then we're going to have Isha prayer after that, inshallah. We will have some time, question and answers after they finish their program. And I think we're going to have plenty of time, so hold on to your questions until they finish the presentation, inshallah. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Wonderful. Okay. My name is Norman McKellar, and I am here with Jim McConkey. We're very grateful for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. We know that there are a lot of uncertain things and concerns about where we are in our country right now. We want to try to go over today some of the main things that we believe can help you, especially if you have an encounter with law enforcement or with ICE in particular. Our group is dedicated to working with refugees. Do we have any refugees here tonight? Anyone? A few? Okay, good. Do we have people here that have green cards? Any green card? Permanent residents? Do we have citizens here? Okay. Good, just trying to get a feel for our breakdown here. Let's get going, and thank you for your patience as we get started. Our group is a group of attorneys, nonprofit attorneys who work to help defend the rights of refugees. In particular, we focus on two distinct areas in helping people. Number one are refugees that are contacted by law enforcement, whether that's local police, or whether that's FBI, or whether that's immigration and customs enforcement. We want to represent any and all refugees who have any contact with law enforcement. Secondly, we focus on helping helping refugees who experience any kind of harassment or discrimination. Has anyone here dealt with any harassment or discrimination? Only you. It was one guy. I bet that's not accurate. I bet a lot of people have dealt with that. And if that happens again, whether it's by law enforcement or whether it's by private individuals, other government agencies, we want to be the one to help you in that fight. We want you to know that you have friends who are willing to defend you and willing to help you as you make this journey. For those refugees, as you make the journey here to obtain your permanent resident, ultimately on the path to citizenship, but also for those who are already here as citizens. And it seems like the biggest group we have tonight are people that are citizens. We believe that you should be able to be a part of our community, be a part of our country without facing discrimination or harassment over your cultural preferences, over your religious beliefs, or your political affiliations. I'm going to put our contact info up there. We also have business cards up here that will have this information, but if anybody needs to contact me specifically or Jim, here's our website, refugeejustice.org. Feel free to go there or to call us, email us anytime that you need help. Probably helps if I actually put it up, okay? So feel free to take a picture of that or write it down. And like I said, we've got business cards if you'd prefer to have that as well. So I'll leave it up for just a second. And you might want to keep your phones out for another second. As I said, we represent refugees, but there are also other organizations that represent people who aren't refugees but are immigrants. And so these are all worthwhile, and there's many more organizations, but these are three worthwhile organizations to keep in mind if you are an immigrant and you need additional resources to help you, whether that's legal or otherwise. Okay, let's get to what we really came to talk about tonight, and that's knowing your rights. And these are some general principles that I want you to leave here tonight knowing. And here's the first one. You do not need to speak with a law enforcement officer without your attorney present. That is a very fundamental right that all Americans have, that refugees have. You don't have to communicate with law enforcement without your attorney present. And we're going to talk about what happens specifically when you get approached by law enforcement, but keep that in mind. You don't have to have these conversations without your attorney. Secondly, you do not have to give permission to a law enforcement officer to enter your home unless that officer has a signed warrant that's been signed by a judge or a magistrate. We'll talk about search warrants here in a little bit. But we're going to talk about a situation where an officer comes up to you, maybe you're in your home, and he or she asks, hey, can I come in and have a talk with you? Or you're in your vehicle, and they're now saying, hey, I want to sit down and talk to you, or have you step out of the vehicle. What do you do in those situations? So we're going to cover those in more detail. You do not need to give permission for a law enforcement officer to search your vehicle or any of your belongings. They will often ask, can I search your vehicle? And the correct answer is no, unless you have a search warrant that has my name on it and describes my vehicle and what you're going to search exactly. All right, one of the things that we have up here tonight that I hope that anybody who wants one will take one, are what we call the rights card. Our goal is to make any encounters that you have with law enforcement as easy as possible for you to handle. So we came up with the rights card, and on one side's just our name and our phone number. But on the back side, it states exactly what your rights are and which rights you're invoking if an officer approaches you. And we'll go over them, and I'll tell you exactly how to use this if you do get approached. So the first thing that it says is that you do not need to speak with a law enforcement, I do not wish to speak with you or hand you any documents without my attorney present. That's the very first thing it says. Next, it says, I do not give you permission to enter my home unless you have a warrant with my name on it signed by a judge or a magistrate. And a magistrate's another type of judge. Next thing it says, I do not give you permission to search my vehicle or any of my belongings. Please contact my attorneys at Refugee Justice League for further information. When you get pulled over, if that happens, and you're in your vehicle, we want you just to be able to hand this to the officer. And that officer will know exactly how you feel, which rights you are exercising, and it lets them know that you have an attorney at the Refugee Justice League and to call us. So, how do you use it? Again, hand the officer the card. And if I were you, my suggestion would be to give it to them right after the officer introduces him or herself and says, hey, I pulled you over because, or I want to talk to you about, whatever their introduction is. I would just hand them this card and tell them to read the rights that you are invoking. Be calm, polite, respectful. Police are generally helpful and professional and will not harm or take advantage of you, generally speaking. Do not resist an officer if he or she forces their way in after you've told them, hey, I don't give you permission to search my car or to come into my house. Remember, you have the right to remain silent, and you should not speak to an officer without an attorney present. If you were asked to do so, tell the officer your name and address, and if you have one, give the officer your driver's license. Do not answer any other questions without your attorney. Let's talk about traffic stops in a little more detail. That text is kind of small. I hope you can see it. But I just want to walk you through, ideally, what should happen if, heaven forbid, you're driving down the road and you see the blue lights behind you and an officer is trying to pull you over. Pull over safely and quickly. Turn off the engine, turn off the light, any internal lights, and open your window. And a good idea we found in my years of practicing is just put your hands on the wheel. Just put them up there on the wheel so that the officer knows you're not concealing anything, you're not grabbing anything, you've got your hands right there on the steering wheel. Upon request, you can give the officer your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. When you drive on Utah roads, that is an agreement that you make, that you will provide that information if it's requested. If you do not have any of these, do not give false documents. You're going to hear us talk tonight about false documents, not that any of you would do that, but providing a false document gets you into another whole area of trouble that you don't want to be in. So if you don't have it, you can tell them, I don't have it. Do not give the officer permission to search your car. If they search your car after you tell them no, do not resist. Do not answer questions about your immigration status. You have no obligation to explain to them your current legal status here in the country. If they are the police, you should ask for their name and badge number and write it down. That will be important to your attorneys later. If they are ICE and ask you for a green card or proof of status, if you have it, you should show it to the officer. Now, they have no right to ask about your immigration status. However, if ICE does that and you have proper documentation with you, it's okay to provide that to them. If you're here in the country and maybe you don't have all of your paperwork in order, don't answer any questions about your immigration status. That's when you definitely, and hopefully have already, provided them with a rights card so that they can contact us and we'll handle it. What about at your home? What if they swing by and they want to visit your home? I think Jim's going to tell some stories later about the first time that President Trump got elected and how they chose to do that back in 2016. But the first thing is stay calm. Do not open the door. And that is your impulse may be, hey, I'm nervous, I'm afraid, they're knocking on the door, they sound angry. Should I go ahead and open the door? And the answer is no, you should not. Do not invite them into your home. If you give them permission to enter your home, they will take it. If they have a warrant for your arrest, ask them to show it to you through the peephole or slip it under the door. If police officers show up and claim that they have a search warrant or they have an arrest warrant, you need to see that before you open the door. So they can slide it under, they can show it to you through the window, and we're going to talk about what a search warrant looks like and what other types of warrants look like so you don't have to be nervous if they start pushing papers in your face. Again, tell them you want to speak to your attorney, but do not open the door for them. If they have a warrant, we need to examine whether it's the right kind of warrant that allows them to come into your home. An ICE warrant, and I'm going to show you a picture of this in a little bit, does not give them permission to enter your home. Those are what we call administrative warrants. They're not signed by a judge. And so we'll talk about those because those we've already seen popping up around the country are being used quite a bit to say, hey, I've got a warrant, open up. And while they do have a warrant, they don't have the correct type of warrant that would allow them to enter your home. A criminal warrant signed by an actual judge may allow them to enter your home. Okay, so that's what we're looking for if they show up and they're showing you a piece of paper through the window or they're sliding it under the door. You always have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk to any of these officers. Do not lie. Never falsely claim to be a U.S. citizen, for instance, if you're not. Again, there's a whole other section of the criminal code that deals with providing false statements to federal officers. We don't want to do that. Even if you don't mean to, words can be twisted, and we don't even want to go down that path. That's why remain silent, but certainly if you do talk, don't lie. And don't show false documents of any kind. False driver's license, social security card, any immigration paperwork that may not be correct, don't show it to them. All right, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. A lot of the same rules are going to apply here. Stay calm, stay composed. If they show up, hand them your card. Know your rights. That's part of what we're doing here today. We want you to understand you've got a right to an attorney. You've got a right to remain silent. But if ICE approaches you, and let's say they approach you out in public, maybe they're not coming to your house. I think Jim's going to talk a little bit about what happens if they would show up at a place of worship, for instance. But let's say you're at the grocery store and ICE approaches you. Let's talk about what your rights are. Do not run or resist. Don't take off, even if you're nervous or concerned. One of the first questions to ask them if they come up to you is, am I free to leave? And there's some legal reasons we want that question answered. And kind of the simple way to explain it is that could determine whether you are actually under arrest, which triggers certain legal rights, or whether they're just wanting to chat with you. If they're wanting to chat with you and they say you're free to leave, leave. Again, do not show false documents. Avoid signing any documents without understanding them. Now, I'll talk a little bit about traffic stops. That's a little bit different situation. If you get pulled over, for instance, if you were speeding and the officer pulls you over and says, I pulled you over because you are speeding, you're going 80 in a 55 mile an hour zone, they will likely hand you a ticket and they will ask you to sign it. You have a couple choices there. One is you don't have to sign anything. You don't have to. You can tell them, I don't want to sign anything without my lawyer present. And that's a perfectly reasonable answer. However, most speeding tickets simply have a place to sign where you acknowledge that you've received the speeding ticket. Not that you agree with it, not that you're pleading guilty, but do not sign that document if you have any doubts about what you're signing. If ICE hands you anything, do not sign it. Record important details. If you have the opportunity to video or audio the exchange, please do so. Otherwise, write down names of officers, badge numbers. Again, this will help if Jim and I have to get involved in a case later to know which officers you were dealing with. And seek legal assistance. Okay. I'm probably going to skip this for the sake of time, but if anybody has any questions as a refugee about travel, please come talk to me afterwards. Okay, let's talk about search warrants quickly. So this is an actual search warrant from a court, and I want to point out a few things to you if someone shows you a paper claiming that it's a warrant, and it's a search warrant. One is you're going to see in a search warrant, there's going to be a section that describes what these officers are allowed to search. If they have a search warrant, that doesn't necessarily give them the right just to go through all of your stuff. A search warrant is typically limited, and it will identify what is allowed to be searched. A motor vehicle, this one says a motor vehicle located on the property, and they name a 2001 green Dodge Stratus with the VIN number. It's specific. You typically will not see a warrant. I don't think I've ever seen a legitimate warrant that says, hey, just search anything you want. It'll say, this is what you're authorized. So look at what's authorized, and then look for that judge's signature. It'll be a judge or a magistrate, they might be called, who has signed off on this search warrant. At that point, they have the right to search what is specifically named in that search warrant. And check obvious things. Check that your name is actually on this warrant, if it's one that pertains to you in particular. I wanted to show you this because we're seeing a lot of these. This is the ICE warrant that I mentioned earlier, and that ICE agents will hold up and say, I've got a warrant, open the door. And part of that is true. They do have a warrant, but this is what we call an administrative warrant. This is a warrant that is signed by an ICE officer, an administrative person within ICE, that authorizes the ICE agent to go out and do whatever the warrant says, to go talk to somebody, to visit a location. However, this warrant does not allow them to come into your home or to search your vehicle unless you give them permission to do so. So be careful if you are approached with a warrant, because they're not going to talk to you about the details of an administrative warrant versus an actual judicial warrant that's signed by a judge. All right, that's the end of my presentation. Jim, do you want to go now, and then we'll do Q&A? Okay, I'm going to hand off.
I'm pretty good at things. Okay. It's good. Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's correct. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just say. Brothers, sisters, I'm glad to see you. As I look out, I see friends that I've known now for years, and it's good to be here. One of the things that, let's see, is this going to work? Oh, good. One of the things that brings us together is our faith and your concern for each other, and Norm and my and other members of our community's concern for all of our brothers and our sisters. I think this paragraph describes something that gives us power to change things in our society. Whether you're a member of your faith or my faith or whatever faith, we join together knowing that we're brothers and we're sisters. When united faith voices are a powerful tool. Faith leaders and their communities are called to protect the vulnerable and offer refuge to those in need. Faith voices have a vital role to play, rooted in principles of love, dignity, and compassion. Faith calls us to act Faith leaders have the unique ability to bring their diverse congregations together and amplify the voices of many and remind us of our shared responsibility to care for and protect each other. One of the things that I love most about my country is what Norm just finished talking about, is there are certain limits, and the police don't have free rein. And they don't always, but they should, and most often will obey the law. And if they don't, something needs to be done about it. When Trump was first elected to office in 2016, I thought I'd just briefly review some of the problems that came up, because these very same problems, unfortunately, are almost bound to happen again. The first is hate speech. And we had refugees that were sent postcards that said horrible things on them. We received calls and messages asking, why are you helping these refugees and people from other countries? They shouldn't be here. We also had situations with travel that were unfortunate. Are any of you familiar with the no-fly zone? Well, when we first started in 2016, some refugees, even refugees with American passports, U.S. citizens, left the country, and when they tried to get back on the plane, the United States forbid them from doing it. I'm sure some of you know Imam Abdi, Joseph Abdi. He went to pick up his family to bring them into the United States to get his kids. And he was stopped from getting back on the plane, and he was a U.S. citizen at the time. We had to go to a United States District Court, and that changed very quickly. It's the only time in my experience as a lawyer of 40 or 50 years that I've seen a judge, after I left the courtroom, call me and say, you can tell the United States Attorney's Office that if Abdi isn't back in a few days, this is what I'm going to do. I delivered that message, and Abdi was back. And there were a number of other cases just like that followed. Not one was successful on the government's part, as long as we could get involved and call the Justice Department and take them off the no-fly list. The no-fly list is put together by a computer. They look at where money goes, how often you travel. They have a logarithm of some sort, and if you qualify, they won't tell you, but when you get to the airport, they'll say, I'm sorry, you can't board. So that's one of the things that happened. We had a wonderful college student stay with us for a couple of days. Her name was Maram. She was a young girl that was 11 when we first started representing her in 2016. She was going to school. She was of the Islamic faith. She wore a hijab. And the students began pulling it off, teasing her, calling her toilet head, she said. And she went to the principal, she went to her teacher. They didn't take it seriously. And so she ended up calling us. And we caught the attention of the school district, and we talked to the principals in the state and the school administrators in the state and explained the importance of respecting other people's religious customs and what they wore. And she changed schools. And the other day, she called me. She's a straight A student. She's now 17 going on 18. She graduated from high school at 16. She got into Rice University in Texas, one of the best in the United States. And guess what? She said she's on her way to law school, for better or for worse. So that's an example of a refugee who succeeded even though there was discrimination, and we helped along the way. One of the worst things that happened were random FBI interviews. We found out that on Saturday afternoon, when you and I should be able to enjoy our family and the peace and quiet of our homes, that FBI agents would just knock on the door, and most people hadn't heard what Norm talked about tonight, and they just opened the door. And then they said, "Can we come in?" And feeling intimidated, the refugees allowed them to come into their homes, and the FBI agents would stay for an hour or so and re-interview them, asking them the very same questions that they'd been asked hundreds of times before, hoping to find a significant difference so that they could accuse them of lying or falsifying a statement to the United States government, and in that way find grounds for their removal. It was terrible. And we got involved. We had a number of different attorneys that called that community together, and we talked to them about what is a warrant, and do you open the door? No. And that practice stopped over time. So we need to know about those things, and that could very well happen again. And then, of course, you have harassment, shouted people that have been refugees and that have been shouted at in public places, paint thrown on the side of their houses. This is a Johnny Davis. I'm not going to leave that up, but that was some of the worst hate speech I have ever seen. Well, what's the status in 2025 then? What can we expect? Well, we may expect, because there's kind of a carryover effect, that because our officials are talking about how anyone that comes into the United States has drugs, guns, and is a criminal, which is false, there's a carryover effect on refugees and people that are here legally and people that are here because they have no other choice, because they are being hunted down in their home countries. They have no other choice, and they're seeking asylum. And we're going to find that these very same things happen to the best of you and also happen to who it should be aimed at, the worst, which is a small fraction of those who come into our country. I call it the dragnet effect, where refugees and other good people are grouped in with illegal immigrants. And it's easier to do now, because under the Biden administration, they didn't allow ICE officers to go into the schools or the mosques or the churches or the hospitals or wait outside a courtroom or to go into various shops. But today, that's not the case. They can. They can go into the schools. But the schools cannot disclose their immigration status. Have you heard about the collateral arrests, where the government claims that they're going after the criminals? Oh, but there just happened to be 10 people that weren't, and we picked them up too. That's just collateral damage. What that is bald-faced hypocrisy, and it shows their true intent. It creates a sense of uncertainty and fear. And we really don't know yet what the Utah legislature and the governor and law enforcement are going to do to cooperate. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office said they're working closely with local and national partners to enforce the law. We have no idea what that means yet. The Salt Lake City Police are deferring to Mayor Mendenhall's office because they don't dare say one thing or the other. And the Utah Refugee Center is reporting that refugees are being stopped by police and asked for their social security number. That wasn't one of the things that Norm had on his list that you have to give them. You just have to give them your name, identify yourself, your driver's license, and documents that prove that the car is registered and that you have insurance. But if they ask you about anything else, just pull that card out of your pocket. And as Norm suggested, give it to them as soon as you roll down the window and put your hands on the wheel. Well, what are the rights of refugees? Remain silent, don't sign anything. If you're detained or arrested, a refugee is legally in the country and should, if you contact an attorney, be released quickly. You have the right to call an attorney. You have the right to be represented by an attorney. The government, in this case, won't provide you with an attorney, but you have the right to be out of jail in a short period of time, or to get what's called a bond. And then I think one piece of advice would be just be careful and obey the law. In this state, the Refugee Justice League went to the state legislature and they changed the law to make it more humane. It used to be that if you got in trouble with the law and stole a pack of cigarettes or some food out of a store and you were caught, you could be immediately arrested and deported. The law now is that you have to commit a felony in order to be immediately deported. And I mean deported, and it's very difficult to keep people here, and there are very few rights that you have once you've crossed that borderline. Well, I just wanted to say a couple of things about places of worship, because that's where we're meeting today. And you know that sometimes ICE comes looking for people that are worshiping together in the faith. And this is what you need to keep in mind. The police and ICE can't go into your home because it's a private place. They can't go into your car because that's considered a private place. But the inside of a church or this area here is a public place. Under the Biden administration, they wouldn't let you go into a church or a mosque, even though technically under the law it's a public space, because I can come in, I don't have to be a member. And so I would suggest that you consider making parts of this mosque private space. A private space, for example, in this building would be an office or a conference room or an area of the mosque where you put up a sign that says, this area is off limits to the general public, but it's got to be clear, it should be roped off, and those who are ushers in the building should be trained to approach any officers and to explain to them that they're welcome to come into the public space, but they may not enter private space in this building. That's one approach that you could take to that kind of problem. Public space, sanctuaries, unfortunately, classrooms or entryways that are accessible to everyone. Private space, offices, meeting rooms, residence. Well, let me conclude with a scripture from the Old Testament. Something that our governor and his legislature ought to pay attention to, along with our president and our national legislature. For it represents the right thing to do. It represents how we feel about each other. It's in Leviticus. When a foreigner resides with you in your land, you must not oppress him or her. You must treat the foreigner as native born and love him or her as you love yourself. That is the voice of faith. That is the voice of God. That is the voice of the church. It's your faith and my faith that amplify our voices, bring us together, create in us the desire to help and be kind to one another. Thank you. So Norm knows more than me, so ask him all the questions.
It's a lot. It is $0. We work for free. Any other questions? Yes, please. I missed the first part of that. Did you get the first part? Can you say that again, or do we have a mic that I just missed the first part of what you were saying? If you get randomly stopped, what should you do? Okay, yes, we did cover that, but let's kind of recap a little bit of some of those points that to keep in mind. If it's a traffic stop, if you're driving your car and you get pulled over, the rules are a little different, but your car is still a private place. But there are some things that you've agreed, if you have a Utah driver's license, that you will do if you get pulled over. You will agree to provide your driver's license. You'll provide proof of registration, that's your vehicle, and that you have insurance. That's it. If they want to know about your immigration status, if they ask to search your car, no. You don't need to discuss any of that with them. We have these rights cards, which I'm going to put probably up in this chair for anybody that wants them. To me, that's your best course of action. Instead of trying to be an amateur lawyer and remember all the things you're supposed to think about, just hand them the card. Because the card will tell them, I'm invoking my right to be silent. I am invoking my right to have an attorney present. And here's the number of my attorneys. Give them a call. But you do have to turn over some things if you're in a car. If you're at your house, it's a little bit more complicated about when they can come in. They have to have a search warrant signed by a judge or a magistrate that specifically says your name and your address and what they're coming to do. I put up an example earlier of what we call an ICE warrant, which is an administrative warrant that they may hold up and say, look, I've got a warrant, let me in. Absolutely not. It has to be a warrant that's signed by a judge, okay? Again, if they come to your house, don't open the door. If they claim to have a warrant, ask them to slide it through the door or stand at the window and show it to you. Shoot, you can even take a picture of it and send it to us. Let us look at it. But you do not need to let them search your car, search your house. You're under no obligation to do so, and you certainly don't have to discuss your immigration status. Good question. Any? Yes, please.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
So what if you run across a situation where the officer or whoever the authority might be is a little extra over the top, and even if you go through all the precautionary steps, it's a hypothetically be arrested just because they're one of those types.
Right.
What do you do then?
Call me. I mean, honestly, that's your best course of action is remain silent, don't sign anything, and request that you be able to contact your attorney. Okay. And then you call us, and it may not be me in particular, it might be Jim, it might be one of our other attorneys. But we want to step in at that point to make sure your rights are protected. But it's a good question because sometimes, even if you do everything that you're supposed to, they're still going to arrest you. Exactly. Right? Because your skin color's a certain color. It's not as lily white as we are. So they're going to be more targeting to you than they are to us, and we know that. So if that happens, remain silent. Do not sign anything. They're really going to get you to try to sign stuff. Don't sign anything. Tell them you want to talk to your lawyer. Give us a call. Great, thank you. Okay.
This gentleman is asking, the Refugee Justice League, is it only working in Utah or other states?
We are only working in Utah. Yeah, one day it would be great to work all 50 states. Yes, please.
Thank you for a beautiful presentation. My question might refer to both of you. If God, heaven forbid, if a deportation comes and a person goes to the justice institution in Utah, also federal courts, and he exhausts all domestic legal remedies, can he file a petition in Inter-American Court of Human Rights or Inter-American on Human Rights Commission based in Washington, D.C., while U.S. has not ratified any refugee convention, like 1955, the refugee convention, the U.S. has not ratified it. So if he has already exhausted all these legal remedies, at the final stage, can he use regional mechanism to enter Inter-American Commission under Organization of American States? And if he goes there, U.S. has not already ratified the convention, and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in Puerto Rico, how can deal with these cases? I know in the book of Leviticus also protects the rights of these individuals. If you could shed us light on these topics.
You want to take this one or you want me to run at it?
I'll say something after.
Okay. All right, I'm going to give you an answer and then he'll give you the right answer. The correct answer is I know it is I don't know. And the reason we don't know is because we have a president that doesn't care about the law and doesn't care about immigrants and refugees and wants to deport anybody of a certain kind. And as disgusting as that is, I don't know how that's going to impact. Your question is great. It's really well thought out. I tell you, you've done your homework. I don't know, in light of where we are right now, if any laws are going to be respected. And as an attorney, or attorneys that have built our lives on following the law and protecting the law, it's a very uncomfortable place to be in. So I know that's a horrible answer to say I don't know, but it's just the truth. All right, Jim, you want to clean that up and make it better?
I preface this by saying I could be wrong, but I don't think the U.S. has signed these agreements, and therefore there's no obligation, moral obligation even, to have any other court outside any power within the confines of the United States have any effect. And so my first impression, if you agree with me, is that it's not a worthwhile avenue or an approach that works.
Thank you. And U.S. has not ratified that convention, but regional convention he has signed it. The Inter-American Courts of Human Rights Convention he has signed it, but not the international convention he has not signed it. So my question was also that if he had not signed the international convention, but he has signed the regional convention on human rights that he's obliged
mean, we're having trouble having them obey the laws of the land here
Right.
by the U.S. Congress, let alone something beyond the United States. I just think it's a tough row to hoe.
I agree. Yeah. If we could just get them to follow the laws that are on the books now, it'd be great. Yes, sir. Oh. We represent refugees, and we have put up some contact information for people who have immigrated here that are not refugees. But right now, with our limited resources, we're just focused on representing refugees. Do you mean specifically when perhaps you're here? Okay. Couple things. One, I really like Jim's suggestion of making, again, this is up to y'all, it's not our decision, but making a portion private. And if anybody approaches, go to the private area. They're not allowed entrance into the private area. They are allowed entrance into the lobbies and the public areas. So it would be nice if there was an area where if word came that ICE agents were coming to visit here, that y'all could all move into a protected area. The second thing would be give us a call. And even if you're not a refugee, if it's a situation where ICE is here, you're probably going to have one of us down here trying to help anyway. But keep in mind all of the rules that we talked about. If they come in here and they want to talk to you, you don't have to talk to them. And you don't have to be rude about it. You can just say, not going to talk. Here's my attorney. Here's my card. Call them. Okay? And that act alone may simply make them go away because they don't want to really deal with lawyers. We don't even really want to deal with lawyers. Okay? We're kind of a rough group.
You know, when those FBI agents were just coming around on Saturday, they didn't know who they were visiting or what they were after. They could never have gotten a warrant. And so if you don't let them in, they're not coming in.
Good question. Can we make the whole building private?
Only if it's a one-time. You'd have to keep the whole
That's a pretty layered question because there could be tax consequences to that, and nonprofit status, and so, yeah, I'd have to do some research on that. Or do you know by chance? Okay, okay. Let us do some homework on that. Is the group a nonprofit group that runs this? Okay. Okay. I need to double check the rules on maintaining nonprofit status if you switch to a private facility. And yeah, let me just double check that before I answer. If there's a way to do that and not have it negatively impact you, I love that idea. Just don't even give them the option to come here. But let me do some research. I'll reach back out to you on that. Yes?
So, for folks watching online, can this slide that you can probably see on the computer screen there,
Oh.
slide on the rights card, when we share this slide deck out with them, can they just print this particular slide, keep it with them to hand to the officers, or is there more to the card?
So there's a little more to the card. The card itself will have our contact information, a phone number that the officer can call right then and get through to us. And also, there's a little bit more on the right side. It specifically references which amendments of the Constitution, the 4th, the 5th, for instance, that they're invoking. It's probably not that important to the officer, but just making sure they know how to contact us. You know, now they could print that off and then they can write on it the contact info or whatever. They don't physically have to have the card. The card's just kind of an easy way to throw it in your wallet or your purse and just have it.
Just want to say thank you. It's a great presentation.
Oh, hey, thank y'all for, it's my first time being here. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes?
What do you think for coming first and then ask about if someone
Okay, so your question is if you had a green card, but it expired and you didn't renew it in time? Okay. So my suggestion would be to call one of the 3 numbers for immigrants, especially Lutheran Family Services. They have a very good attorney there named Athelia Graham, and she handles people that are in that situation. The correct procedure is going to be to go ahead and normally reapply, even though you're past the date. With all the changes that have happened since Trump has taken over, that makes me incredibly nervous. So you're kind of in a weird spot, but call Athelia, unless, I mean, Catholic Community Services would also be able to, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky one now. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How does it work in terms of if ICE, say, comes to your home, do they have to announce who they are when they knock on the door? Because I'm thinking of like at my home, like we don't have a key, for instance.
Right.
So normally, knock on the door, just kind of open.
Right.
And it's like, so what is the protocol for that now if anyone else is in that situation?
Yeah, good question. First off, get a peephole. Probably a worthwhile investment, or at least have access to, maybe there's a window by your door that you can look out. Technically, they are supposed to announce which agency they're with. It gets a little tricky, though, because the federal government is asking local sheriff's office to participate and to be agents, essentially, of ICE. So they may say, well, I'm from Salt Lake County Sheriff, but they're there on ICE business. And in fact, I think in one of the articles you referenced, the sheriff's office is actually in D.C. right now, according to the article, trying to coordinate how they're going to handle implementing these policies, so it doesn't sound good. I wish they would just say, hey, that's not our issue. We have local issues to deal with. We don't need this stuff. But so I would love to tell you there's an easy way to say, hey, are you ICE? But they could just as easily say, we're with Salt Lake County Sheriff, or we're with Utah County Sheriff, or whatever, and you think, oh, it's not ICE. So again, there's no reason for you to open the door, I mean, outside of you wanting to see who's actually there, but if you could set up a way with maybe a camera or something that allows you to see who's actually there. If it's law enforcement, I wouldn't open the door, and again, I would walk through the steps that we talked about. Provide me with a warrant, slide it under the door, put it in the window. Let me see that a judge has signed it. Let me see that it's actually addressed to me and it's not just some piece of paper that you guys pulled out of your back pocket. But yeah, it's a good question, but it's...
That was the same with just regular law enforcement as well.
Yes.
Like, what are you here for? Just
Yep.
no, not talking.
Yep, yep, your home is protected. Now again, if they say, oh, well, we've got a warrant, great, let me see it. Let me take a look at it. Yes, sir.
Kind of unrelated, but I heard there was an executive order for a freeze on funding for like financial aid and Medicare and Section 8. Is that accurate?
So there was, and it's now been lifted. President Trump, there may be others who know more about it, but my understanding is President Trump did do that. There was a lot of outcry and outrage over that, and so that has been lifted. So supposedly it's back to business as usual. Do you know any more about that?
No, I think you're right.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Oh, you're gonna make us read? All right. Okay, so this question is, and I'm gonna let Jim answer this one. This says, are there any learning materials that are easy to follow to learn more about the law of the land? No complicated legal terms.
Well, I think the easiest thing would be, and I really respect the group, the ACLU, and if you get on their helpline, the Utah, they have some pretty clear materials there that are tested, accurate, and helpful. And they're quite simple and straightforward. But that's the easiest, I think, way to kind of get a handle on. They have, for example, what are the rights of refugees, what are the rights of immigrants, and you can kind of get a sense for it there and study it if you want to.
Great. Be very careful on YouTube and other places where everybody's an expert. Make sure the people that you're watching or reading are actually people that are professionals.
Good thought there.
Okay. Second question. Any idea why would the police often take advantage of people not knowing the law? How long do you have for me to answer that question? I could take days ranting about that. Jim, you're far kinder than I am. Do you want to explain why police might take advantage of somebody not knowing the law?
Well, because they're lazy and they want to take shortcuts. And my own opinion is that the lawyers in this country, which are the most important in terms of maintaining your freedom and mine, are defense attorneys appointed by, if someone, a U.S. citizen has to be represented by an attorney. If they can't afford one, the state pays for one. And it's the attorneys that force the police not to take shortcuts. And that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I agree. Unless the police are watching, then that was just Jim who said that. That wasn't, no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, my background is I've spent the last 20 years doing criminal defense work in Tennessee and Georgia. And so we just moved out here not too long ago, but I often would tell people my job is to make sure that the police and law enforcement did their job. And that kept me very busy because they often did not do their job properly. All right, next question. Okay, actually this has already been asked. Do we help people other than refugees? Is there any plan to expand the scope? We would love to expand the scope at some point to represent people beyond refugees. Again, we just don't have the resources, manpower, and so forth to take on all the cases we would like to take. So we have to limit what we take. So again, we put up some other contact info for other organizations that do great work and help people outside of just refugees. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Would a chain on the door be a good device for seeing who's there?
That's not a bad idea. My concern is anytime there's a door opening, that it might get kicked in, or they might interpret that as you inviting them in. At least that might be the story that they say. So I personally wouldn't do that. That's just because I don't trust police. Any other questions? And we'll stick around if anybody wants to come and just talk to us privately. Yes? I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time hearing.
Has ICE released like the category of the people they are going to privatize to target West?
Yes, they have said that they're going to go after the criminal element. However, as Jim talked about, we're seeing a lot of people get picked up that aren't criminals. We're seeing people get picked up who are U.S. citizens. We're seeing people get picked up who are here legally as refugees. We're seeing people get picked up as permanent residents and green cards. So it does not seem to be, I mean, it depends on what you want to believe. Either that's part of their plan is just to pick up whoever, or they're not quite ready to just identify people with criminal convictions. So I don't know, but in theory, they're going after people with criminal convictions. I don't know if you want to.
No, I agree, yeah.
Okay.
I would like to thank